slowly. Okay, just to let you know, and I thank you for getting back here early, right on time, but I do understand there are people that are just getting served food now, so logistically, it's just not possible to do the 12:45 prizes. And yeah, I know that. Boo, boo. I don't need your vote till next year, okay? And then I'll be kissing babies and giving you all big hugs and kisses on the cheeks and smiling all the time. Yeah, pat on the back. Good job. Good job. I love you, you know, I love you. But I'll keep that, that's all in my campaign next year. That's not this year. Okay, so we do have a quick announcement.
Wait, Kukwada, Valerie West, Rinsquext, Swaspokatam, is Da'akun. I work with WLFN. I'm the Culture and Language Team Assistant. And so I'll be set up out in the gathering place out back here is a round building with my smudge, and I'll have my drum and stuff. So if you guys want to come out and smudge, you guys are welcome to. And if not, then maybe I'll try and serenade you too. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, like I mentioned, logistically, people were just served food, so we certainly apologize, but we understand people are having their meals now and eating. And I know that business still has to continue and work, and just like anything else, I'm going to ask the nurses to come on up, and Jenny, and we're going to do a quick intro. But and I really appreciate the nurses and TRU because my mom wasn't feeling well, so she had to go back to the room with my dad. So, you know, after cancer and couple operations, she's not 100%, so she wasn't feeling well. And it was the nurses that, along with my Aunt Margot and others, that attended to her and really appreciate it. It's almost like the policing, right? You know, you don't commend people that give their lives and training, you know, until you need them. And then all of a sudden, and I'm the same way, nurses, and we're like, thank you, Qelmucw, you know? And I feel the same way about policing in a way, you know, like we don't commend them until we need them. And so, especially during the pandemic and, you know, nurses and those that are training to be nurses and those that are nurses really much appreciate it. So I know Jenny's going to have a few words. I'm going to ask my language speaker, is there anything you want to say at this particular time? Okay.
Qelmucw Kukpi7
Okay. So Jenny, please come up and take over here for a moment.
Hello, thank you for having us. My name is Jennifer Grinstead. I'm a registered nurse. I teach here at TRU. These are 3 of the 7 nursing students, second-year nursing students at Thompson Rivers University here in Williams Lake. They're Bachelor of Science of Nursing students. They do their first 2 years here in Williams Lake, and then they're just finishing, actually. They have 2.5 weeks left, and then they're going off to Qelmucw. And then hopefully some of them will return back to our communities. Oh, here's a few more. And then tomorrow you'll meet 8 more. So you'll see a few different faces tomorrow. They're wandering around. They'll help you with water, getting you snacks, doing your blood pressure if you'd like, first aid, helping you in and out of your car. They'll actually help you with anything you need. They're always around helping. What else can I say? I don't know. These students, I'm very proud of them. They've been working really hard the last 2 years. They love to be part of all of your communities. I'd like to thank you for hosting them, for their clinical experiences. They have learned a lot about trauma-informed care. Cultural safety is a huge part of their practice here in Williams Lake. And they've been honored to be in, and want to thank you for welcoming them into your communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, much appreciated. And as mentioned, they do have a booth that is out there. So, I don't even know if Fran had a chance to eat yet, so she might be still doing that. So okay, so now we got, and we'll get Fran and we'll get to the prizes. Trust me, I know this is pretty important. But now we're going to do the video for the NStQ declaration. Qelmucw.
Since creation, Secwepemc have lived here. The land has held them up and sustained their families. This land is called Secwepemc. Their surviving traditional knowledge, language, and culture has been passed on through generations. Through the stories and from the language, these traditions and knowledge make Secwepemc strong. Northern Secwepemc have worked hard to revitalize the language and the traditions that make their nation great. The NStQ Declaration is a statement of determination and commitment to the principles that form traditional practices and a Secwepemc way of life. It states in a clear way what it means to be Secwepemc. The modern world benefits from the principles the Declaration describes. The document is in 4 main parts that together form the guiding principles of Secwepemc society. Families are the center of every community. Traditional self-governance relied on the experience of members in each of the most important aspects of community living to guide the nation. Chiefs of hunting, gathering, fishing, medicines, storytelling, and more. Each an expert and each responsible to pass on their knowledge. Sharing, respect, and family are important Secwepemc qualities. The connection to the land and the animals around them is also important to everyday life. That combined knowledge led to thousands of years of success as Secwepemc.
Isjaya Twils was Secwepemc. Na Secwepemc de Qelmucw Tchi wa stem. Secwepemc Squaquinjean el Huhuides de Swacht. Jelchamstes wa Quaklutens el Lek Esses de Secwepemc el Haldance el Qelmucw. Jelchamstes Huhuit wa Swach. Haken met Ausk Stem was Qelmucw el Hapkanwens. Was elks stilchamstes guests was stem juchmenjuts. Kukpi Qnuchmens Stekwameetplattens as la street was stem. Chilam deswaechs las spelquaks. Chbeukst wa hochulch mis wat milch. Elmet ilam street wa kwaukna elksts.
To be Secwepemc is to be a strong, self-confident, and respectful people who stand up for our beliefs and are proud of our heritage.
Families are proud of their strong roots, are loyal to relationships, and share in the responsibility of caring for children, for elders, and for those in need.
Our survival as Secwepemc depends on our collective abilities to look after Secwepemc, to see ourselves as part of the Secwepemc, and to use the resources around us in a respectful manner.
We respect the collective knowledge built through time on Secwepemc, including gathering methodologies and traditional uses of resources for food, shelter, medicines, and technologies.
From the Eagle's viewpoint, there are the issues of Indigenous people that impact Secwepemc life that include the legal, social, and political decisions made elsewhere.
At the same time, there is the ground view of a mouse in the immediate surroundings. This calls for a balance of both views to address all matters as they relate to community.
All decisions made should reflect a sound basis of good judgment, of equality, and be based on the best interests of the people.
The leader is articulate and has the ability to strongly express views and to stand by these views. The leader hears the concerns of the people and acts with purpose. Leaders look for opportunities to empower others.
The NStQ Declaration is the result of the work of a dedicated group of language speakers from a number of Secwepemc communities in the north. They met as a committee beginning in 2011. They began meeting with speakers in 2012. The NStQ Declaration was presented to members at the 2014 Citizens Assembly. Since then, it has waited for the recognition it deserves. The recognition as a living code that will serve members and their leaders for many years to come. This film is dedicated to all the elders and knowledge keepers who over the years worked so hard to keep the language alive.
Right. Ah. So we gave an opportunity, of course, to see everybody that was involved. Qelmucw, thank you, and that was excellent. That was beautiful. That was everything that was built up to be. And of course, I've been leaning on it and reading through it, and the NStQ Northern Secwepemc Qelmucw Declaration. But we do have to get on with business, so appreciate everybody that was involved. Qelmucw, thank you. So we fell a little bit behind schedule. As you can see, it's my job to get us back on schedule, and I will be doing so. So I'm just going to get right down to the next line of business, and that being our Chief Commissioner of the BC Treaty Commission, Celeste Haldance. So Celeste, I don't know if you really need an introduction or not, but Celeste, of course, is a lawyer. She's been appointed for a number of years now, I think on her third term of Chief Commissioner, and boy, oh boy, if I have to go through your education, I'll be here for a half an hour. You know, Masters of Law and Constitution from Osgoode Hall Law School at York University. Oh, I'll just leave it at that. Whoa. So anyway, I'm going to let the knowledge and language speaker go next, and then he'll introduce you up in a correct and right way.
Qelmucw7 Qukpi7 Alex Katakse besluten 2017 to Qelmucw as Alex na Queen's Council in 2019 Alex na Seluvix as Jilks de Swooks na Qelmucw sa Qelmucw Goltons as Alex na Criminal Defense as Civil Litigation. Celeste.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And first, I want to acknowledge Squile, that's good day in my Hokkien speaking language. I'm very honored and privileged to be within this beautiful territory of yours among such incredible people and leaders. I also am very moved by the video and the presentation that we have just witnessed, and we've all bear witness to that, and to the testament of survival and dignity of your people, of your citizens, and codifying it in such a beautiful manner, which is, again, about self-determination, self-governance. And I will talk briefly about some of the innovations in the negotiations, and in particular, some of the negotiations and where they're at here. So I just said I was going to do that, so we'll just skip along. This is just a brief snapshot of where negotiations are in British Columbia with how many nations are currently negotiating. As well, there's 8 modern treaties that are being implemented, 7 that were negotiated through our process. I just wanted to share some of the highlights as to those negotiations that are getting ready to close. So we have Qelmucw, that's on the Vancouver Island. Their main land and cash components have been agreed to in 2023. There also continues to be innovations within the negotiations, and in particular, some new chapters and some new language that has been created around the administration of law and the ability for First Nations to enforce their laws on their territories. As some may know, it's difficult to enforce laws on First Nations lands when you don't have that reciprocity or agreement. And even if you do have agreement with police services to enforce laws, it is still very difficult. And I want to say that one of the innovations that has come to fruition is the fact that First Nations will have the ability, and modern treaty nations will have the ability, to draw down jurisdiction when they're ready, to enforce their own laws on your own territories in a way that you see fit, that matches how you want to protect your territory. So that's an innovation. There's also some discussion around perhaps being able to have First Nations courts. Again, these are early discussions, negotiations that are happening, but I think it's a really important innovation when we want to talk about fulfilling self-governance and the ability to govern your lands and your territories which match the way that you steward your lands. You need to be able to have the power and the ability to do that piece of work, the enforcement work. Another notable highlight this year in innovations in negotiations is the Section 87 exemption. So this has always been a lightning rod issue in community, that in previous negotiations and previous treaties, there was a trade-off. The trade-off was self-governance, you lose tax exemption, Section 87. So buying goods and services on reserve. Well, the federal government announced that that is no longer the case, that's no longer the policy. So your communities will decide how they want to implement your taxation authority and regime. So it's not something that's automatic, it's now up to you and to your community members and to your leaders to decide when and if they want to remove Section 87. And I think that is a really positive development for those that are going down the road of self-governance, to be able to retain that taxation power. Another notable change is the shared decision-making. There's a new chapter on shared decision-making, and I really want to acknowledge the collaboration that was undertaken between, in particular the province, but nations that are in advanced negotiations around developing shared decision-making. So what that's truly going to look like on the ground when it comes to implementing your treaty and your self-governance moving forward. So those are some really positive innovations that have transpired over the last year since the last time I was here. I just wanted to share that. Another treaty that's moving to close and actually moving to initial at the end of June is Qelmucw. So again, they have, through the negotiations, are implementing and will implement the Section 87. So they're retaining Section 87. They're also continuing to look at the enforcement of laws, so making sure that that chapter and that work continues in Qelmucw, as well as they're undertaking extensive community engagement, which is so important. And that's why I look to see all the citizens that are here, because having you all brought along in the journey of self-governance is so important. And having your voices heard as citizens is in such incredible importance when it comes to self-governance and moving beyond the confines of the Indian Act. So most of their land and cash has been established and agreed to. And then another final nation that's moving to close the negotiations is Qelmucw, again, looking to initial at the end of June. So again, they're embarking on their journey of community engagement, moving towards closing their negotiations and looking to hold their ratification next year. So we'll see a number of nations moving to close the negotiations and then moving to community ratifications in the next year or two. So that's an exciting update for the negotiations process. It's also exciting because there's a lot of new changes that have come to the treaty negotiations process, and some of them I've highlighted. I just wanted to share a little bit about the HIDA title and recognition legislation. Again, HIDA has been negotiating within our framework for a number of years. And so I wanted to share the fact that there are different ways and different pathways for nations to move forward in how they see fit. So basically, their self-determination through their visioning. And HIDA has approached how they want to implement their title and rights in a way that's legislated. And I want to also share the fact that HIDA has been successful in the courts. They have won at the Supreme Court of Canada. They have won in British Columbia courts. And so their way to negotiate how they want to coexist is through legislation, and this is done in an incremental way. So they're building on certain memorandums of understanding, certain agreements that they came to with both Canada and British Columbia. They're, again, wanting to ensure that their citizens are included and that their vision of self-governance and self-determination is reflected in how they choose to move forward. And this goes back to the foundation of when the process began, when the negotiations process began. What HIDA has envisioned and what they've achieved was set out in the original spirit of intent of the 19 recommendations in the task force report. It's just taken a long time to get here. And I want to applaud HIDA for continuing to push and persevere and move their vision of self-determination forward in a way that they see fit. And again, this is something that has been done through our framework. It's also reflective of the new policies that we have in place where things can be done on an incremental basis. There are different approaches to negotiation. So as you sit and have conversations and figure your pathways forward, there are other ways and other options to continue to do that work. And so we'll continue to support HIDA as they move through their next phases of legislation, which is the federal step 2 legislation. I just wanted to announce and share that Liaxin has achieved their incremental treaty agreement. So I know that there's been a lot of work that has been done up within your communities around incremental treaty agreements, in particular around ranching and making sure that there are earlier benefits achieved. And here's a nation that was able to finally pursue their ITA and see it come into fruition. And I think this is a great testament as to how the negotiations continue to work with industry as well as the province, but also you have two nations that are going to share this resource, this forestry resource, until they have made further discussions on how they want to continue to move the relationship forward. So again, early benefits that are coming to nations, purchasing land and forestry resources. So again, another way to continue to incrementally build towards self-governance. This is just a quick one from Qelmucw. So again, Qelmucw is approaching their negotiations in a different manner. They have a Douglas Treaty. So again, building on the treaty that they have in 1854, there was a number of lands that were held both federally and provincially, and those lands have been transferred over to Qelmucw. So again, looking to develop out their community in Nanaimo in a way that they see fit. So dealing with some of the housing crisis that we find in our communities, whether it's First Nations or non-First Nations communities. We are all struck with some of the challenges around housing, so they're going to be able to focus and build out some of their territory in a way, creating economic opportunities, but also creating housing opportunities for them. And so continuing to move forward in their works. I'm going to skip along this. I will share this deck for those that want additional information, but I think one of the important facets around the shared priorities framework is coming out of the United Nations Declaration legislation, and so recognizing that Canada or British Columbia and modern treaty nation holders have a direct relationship, and they continue to move forward in implementing their treaties through the shared priorities framework, but also implementing the declaration through, again, the framework that they've agreed to. And so I know modern treaty nations have an alliance in British Columbia, and they're certainly looking forward to including more modern treaty partners in the fold to continue to work towards building out more modern treaty nation holders. So when you're at that stage, there'll be a table that is there, ready, willing, and able to bring you into the fold as well. And so just looking at how to advance both implementation of the declaration through modern treaty making at the provincial level and then the federal level. And this is the federal level, which is, there's a new policy around implementation. So again, looking at future thinking and forward looking, that there's a policy, but there's also been a new commissioner announced that will be overseeing the federal government's responsibility to implement modern treaties. And that announcement was shared last month. And so they're looking at an oversight body to ensure that modern treaty nations and self-governing nations actually have a mechanism and a conduit to be able to engage with Parliament and others to ensure that what has been agreed to, what has been negotiated is actually upheld, and that there is a mechanism to uphold that implementation, which I think is really incredibly important when we're looking at building and rebuilding our relationships with each other. We already talked about Section 87, and I just wanted to share a couple of updates from your table. I want to really acknowledge and applaud the leadership that your treaty team and your Kukpis and your citizens, that you have demonstrated committing to work together collaboratively and collectively, because it's not an easy job for multi-nation communities to come together and want to collectively negotiate. And you have been doing such an incredible, amazing job doing that and undertaking the work that is necessary to move your communities forward through negotiations. And so I really want to recognize and applaud the team that has been steadfast in pushing the other two parties forward. I noticed that we do have our provincial representatives and who will also be speaking afterwards. But I really want to take the time, from my perspective as an independent body, that you've done incredible, incredible work and have achieved many milestones. And I want to continue, and we will continue to support your negotiations moving forward, and recognizing that multi-nation tables sometimes do have There are a variety of pieces that must continue to work together, but also respecting the autonomy of each of the nations as well in the negotiations. So just wanted to share some of my insights and perspectives around that. And then also want to acknowledge the extensive governance and community development and capacity development work that has been undertaken. As I mentioned earlier, it takes a lot to continue to negotiate together, and it takes a lot of internal governance building and to bring everyone along, like yourselves in the audience, and looking at the incredible amount of work that has been accomplished with treaty chapters being negotiated, looking at ratification transitions, child welfare, education, parks and rec, and also still continuing to build out things that are very important to your community, which is language, culture. I see a number of babies. I want to squish them all. As a grandma, I want to just hug them. But recognizing that you're doing this for your future generation. So I really want to hold my hands up to you in particular, citizens of your community members, and just really applaud your efforts for continuing to be dedicated and steadfast in your negotiations process. So with that, Haichka, which is thank you. Thank you. I know.
Okay, Celeste and I, we go way, way, way back. We were commissioners together. And then I had the bright idea to run for the task group and the political executive of the First Nations Summit. And then she had the idea to become the chief commissioner with BC Treaty Commission. No, I'm just joking, all joking aside. So Celeste, thank you for your insight, thoughts, and certainly, you know, again, with the communities and First Nations and nations that are approaching treaties, agreements, or other constructive arrangements, she alluded to the HIDA and, of course, all the other agreements. One quick little note I do make, a lot of the reconciliation, a lot of the agreements that we do see that are in place have come from tables such as the NStQ. So a lot of good work that the chief negotiators presently, and especially the treaty team. So I'm going to ask the treaty team to come on up. We got about 5 or 10 minutes. I know this is a little bit off script, but I also would need to ask the knowledge keeper, language speaker, if he has a few words as well.
Qelmucw Celeste Qukluitspin de Seek. Indigenous Qukluits treaty team Alia.
Good afternoon. I'm Gord Keener. I'm the treaty manager and negotiator for Hatsuth. And I've been working in this process for Hatsuth for 21 years. I've worked at the tribal office in town for 3 years. I've actually worked for Swethan Heiklum for 1 year as well as part of this process. And in the last year, or well, let's say since January, we've actually made strides in this process. We've accomplished quite a bit in chapter work and moving things forwards, trying to pick up the pace and move things along quickly. And without the support of our staff that should stand up, introduce yourselves. If the different community staff can stand, please. Melody. Gertie. She's still here. Or she might be outside. But anyway, without these people in the background helping us, some of this work wouldn't get done. Because we got a lot on our plates to get done. So not trying to hog the mic and stuff, I'll pass it on for Liz to talk about herself, because she's been here since the statement of intent.
Qelmucw Pupishman. And Pupishman is weeks gehoidet, because Qelmucw and Ellie and Tlachluch. I'm glad to see all of the elders here. I acknowledge the elders. I acknowledge our visitors to the area, I acknowledge BC Treaty Commission. I acknowledge the past leadership that we have, the chiefs that are in the crowd, and acknowledge all the young mums, the mums that have little ones there. They're part of our bosses. All of you are who we work for. And that is one of the policies in our office there at Qelmucw. Whoever walks through our door, offer them coffee, be good Secwepemc. Give them something, listen to them, give them part of the time. Yeah. It's been a long, long journey. I did plan on retiring at one point there, and then things didn't work out for my co-worker. He moved on, and here I am. And before I move on, if I ever move on before this, I hope to see this, some of this work done. But I'd like to acknowledge the people who are educated, especially in teaching. One of the ideas I had was to create a syllabus, to put together a program specifically about this process, to teach it as a course that you could get credit for and that you could learn about at the same time, that you could debate things, that you could write papers about, that you could write your dissertation papers about, that you could write academics, that you could do research. That's my dream, is to be, and I started doing that a couple of times, to be able to do that. I think that's one of the ways that, like, I do have a teaching background. I graduated from Gonzaga U 30 years ago, But getting back to treaty there just briefly, my late mother was around, and I told her, hey, there's some kind of big meeting happening up at Williams Lake. We should go get nosy. I told her, it's got something to do with treaty, so we should go and be nosy and go there. So we went to one of the motels, I think, or Stampeder at the time, someplace. And the late Bruce Mack was chairing the meeting. Lauren Greenaway was a commissioner way back when, was there. And they were talking about treaty, and then Bruce was saying, we're going to have a worker in each community. Here's how it's going to work. We'll have some other staff later on, and he described some of the positions, and then he says, oh, by the way, Canham Lake already has their worker. And I was thinking to myself, I haven't seen any postings, and, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And then he says, oh, it's Liz Pete, she's been hired. Roy had already hired me. He pulled me from the school. He says, we'll second you to the admin there for 1 year. You'll work in Aboriginal rights and title. And so I got up there and I said, okay, where's my job description? I ended up having to write some of that. I said, you had 2 workers before me, where's the files? A box was brought to me, it was half full. I went through that was my files. I organized my files. So the journey began from there, but a lot of your relatives, your uncles, your cousins, your ba'as, your mums and dads and grandparents came to those meetings, gave their ideas, came faithfully back again and again. We didn't start in 1993, we started in 1911, 1910. Yeah, the letter to Sir Wilfrid de Laurier. All the things that were written and identified by those chiefs are relevant yet today. They are They are very, very relevant. So I applaud you for continuing. I couldn't be standing here, if you weren't interested, if you wanted us to go down a different path. It's only you that decides that. I don't. I follow the direction given to you. And I think I will leave it there. I wanted to say something about the declaration, but Robert, he's tied to the clock there, so I'll leave it there for now. Qelmucw.
Wade Qelmucw and Qelmucw First Nation, and I am the Director of Self-Government for our community, and I just want to give thanks to everybody here. I know it takes a lot individually to just be here and come in today and be a part of this, but I know you're here for our future generations and you're concerned about what that is going to look like. And I'm grateful to be here and be in the role that I am in today, and it wouldn't be without my community of SXFN or Qelmucw. They're the reason why I'm here, and my kids and my family, so I'm here just the same reason why you're here, sitting here today. And I have the same interest and the same vision to make sure that our community is thriving at the end of the day. So NStQ to every one of you, our elders, our youth, all of our nations, and I'm just grateful. NStQ.
Okay, so that's our treaty team. Okay, we're going to move right along. Appreciate it. Thank you, Liz. Liz was my boss one time when I was the urban coordinator, and she still is my boss. And Gordon, I remember when we needed negotiators, Gordon was always the first hand up, and boy, could he negotiate, I'll tell you. He put everybody on notice, and he works very, very hard. I'm going to ask Fran to come on up. They had to do some details with the prizes, so move things around a little bit. So I'm going to give the floor to Fran, and because if I don't, I know there's going to be a revolt, and so I think it's very important that we do this ASAP. That was the notice that I was given.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. It takes me 45 minutes to eat anything. So I didn't sit down on time to eat my lunch, and then I looked at the clock and it was after 1. I was like, what? Oh my God. So I came running back in here. I really enjoyed it. I had the shepherd's pie and the Caesar salad. It was really good. I wasn't quite sure if I had finished my thought earlier. I was talking about my son when he was very little and he was sitting at the table playing with his games and stuff. And I was mentioning the leaders. And I was like, leaders aren't only the Kukpi sitting at the Kukpi tables, but they're also you and I, because we do different things in the community. So I just want to finish that thought for right now. Our first number is 606-300. Yeah. Yay. Our next number is 605-792. 605-792. takes us a little while to work through these because we write down the number and then we check the number with the ticket, and then we need a signature as well. So we're just taking a few moments to do that. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that we had a very generous donation from the Orange Shirt Society. We have a teddy bear and a book, and we have 5 of those sets. So what we're going to do is just walk out into the audience a little bit later, and we'll just hand them out randomly. So we wanted to say thank you to the Orange Shirt Society for that gift, and it's very much appreciated. Okay, it looks like I'm getting that hook too. So 605-762. Yay! Now that's excitement, right? That's okay. That's so we have 605-760 and 606-409. Thank you, and we will be handing out those teddy bears and books.
Okay, thank you, Fran. I know there's a lot of, we got to get the details. There's a lot of information. So we do have to move right along. So I had a nice big long introduction for Peter, but Peter, I'm going to ask you just to come right up here, introduce yourself, and let's get right into it. And we have to move the agenda along quickly here so that we can get you out of here as close as possible to 4 p.m.
Glenda, Peter.
Short and sweet.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Millard. I'm the interim chief negotiator for NStQ. I'd like to say thank you to all of you for having me here. It's really great to be here on Williams Lake First Nation territory and in the Secwepemc with all of you. So thank you very much. Really pleased to be here. So what I want to do, I won't be very long up here. I just want to introduce myself, tell you who I am, talk a little bit about what my role is and what we're doing. So I grew up on Salt Spring Island in Coast Salish territory. I've been living in Vancouver for about the last 20 years. And I'm a lawyer by training. I work at Mandel Pinder in Vancouver. That's a law firm established in 1983, and we work exclusively or almost exclusively for Indigenous governments. We do treaty work, self-government work, we do litigation, and we do a lot of historical claims. And one of the claims that we worked on is the Williams Lake Village Lands claim, which we took all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada for Williams Lake First Nation, and it's really wonderful for me to be here on what we refer to as the village lands and see this place that we were fighting about for so long. Mandel Pinder also works a lot on shared decision making, and we were involved in the Taltan Section 7 shared decision making agreements, and it's something that we firmly believe in. We have a long history of working with NStQ and have been legal counsel to NStQ on the treaty negotiations for many years. And my colleague Roseanne Kyle was once in the chief negotiator role, and a few months ago we were asked to come back and step back into that role on an interim basis, and so I've been in that role since March, working with the treaty team, some of whom you met earlier, and it's been a really great experience and an honor to work with them and learn from them and help them to move their vision forward. So I work for you, of course. I don't drive this process. My role here is really to help the treaty team and the leadership achieve their vision, which is to provide a firm and durable foundation for the future of NStQ as a self-governing people. And so my job is really mostly to listen to the treaty team and to leadership, and to be kind of a guide and an advisor. And also to work with my colleagues back at Mandel Pinder to ensure that the treaty that we're helping to negotiate protects your rights, affirms your rights, and is to the greatest extent possible consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. My job isn't to chart the path. It's not to decide where we're going. It's really that's for you as rights holders and for your leaders. My job is really to help the team, the treaty team, navigate that path, and to allow them to stay on the path that they've charted and to achieve their goals. And we do that through daily work, really. Just to give you a tiny window into what we do at the table. Typically the main table, the table that NStQ treaty managers attend with British Columbia and Canada, meets every month for a couple of days. And before those meetings, there's an awful lot of preparation work that goes in by everyone on the treaty team to present documents that reflect their views, the views of their leadership and of their people. We exchange those, we attend those meetings, and then of course after every meeting we meet with leadership and we brief them on what's been done, where we're going, where we're at, and what obstacles we're encountering. And then there's also a bunch of technical work that happens kind of behind the scenes to identify lands and to work through technical issues. And I mean, I think one thing I really want to leave you with here is that we as a treaty team take direction from your leaders, and they, of course, take direction from you as rights holders. So I really do encourage you to talk to your leaders, to let them know your concerns, you know, your vision for self-governance for yourself and your community, and also to talk to me. I live in Vancouver, but I am here this week. I'll be here all day today and tomorrow. So do feel free to pull me aside and give me a piece of your mind or share some insight with me, because I'm really here to advance your interests as much as I can. So thank you very much for having me, and it's really a pleasure to be here.
Wow, a chief negotiator that's succinct, quick, to the point. Wow. Right on. Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. So as you can see, I'm trying to move things along so we can get out of here by 4 o'clock. I do have this big, long introduction for Tom McCarthy, who's the now Deputy Minister for Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. But I'm going to ask Tom if he can just come right on up. But to let you know, I've known Tom for years. He also worked at Tsawwassen. I think it was the CAO. Yeah. So I thank him because I go shopping at Tsawwassen Mills all the time. And also thank him because, you know, one of the first treaties that were out of the gate. So, and I know for the community at Tsawwassen, for example, if you want a job, you got a job. And, you know, I was also looking at children and family issues because I just came from a conference. I don't think they have any children in care. So, like, there's a lot of positives that come out of treaties, but as well to see him now rise to the ranks of the government, I really appreciate that he's here, and to present to the NStQ. Tom, come right on up, and our knowledge speaker and
Qelmucw Kukpi7 Tom Elliott.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Robert, for the kind introduction. And I really appreciate it. And it really is an honor to be in this role as Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, but also to bring some of the previous experience from my role at Tsawwassen First Nation, and to be able to reflect on that experience when faced with decisions in the provincial system, and think through how different approaches would work in the context of Treaty First Nations, and often find myself answering questions both with trying to put on my former hat in my role at Tsawwassen as well as the provincial hat. And one of the lessons I learned there is also to be succinct, so I will try to do that. I want to thank you for welcoming me onto Secwepemc territory, and specifically to Williams Lake First Nation for welcoming us onto their lands. And I'd like to acknowledge the Kukpis who are here, and really thank them for giving me the time to speak, and acknowledge all of you as well. I want to go over a few pieces, and Celeste spoke about some of them. I want to talk a little bit about the treaty process and some of the things that we're trying to change in the province, as well as some other recent and related accomplishments, and sort of the direction that I think that points to in terms of where we're working with partners to take treaty negotiations. And so, as Celeste said, treaties are a really essential pathway to meaningful reconciliation. As we saw in the presentation from Celeste with certainly the Qelmucw and the Qelmucw and the Qelmucw treaties, those are important treaties because they're the first treaties that we'll have come through for approval in about 10, 12 years. And a lot of the changes that we've tried to make in the treaty process in that time are reflected in those treaties. And it'll be really good to kind of see in detail the language in those treaties, and so that you as well can evaluate some of the new tools in those treaties and how they might work in the context of the work that you're doing with your communities. And so while I'll talk about some of those changes, at their core, what treaties are really about is ensuring that nations have the lands and the resources and authorities, particularly the self-government and self-determination authorities. And if there's one lesson I took away from Tsawwassen, I mean many lessons from the people there, but if there's one lesson I took away, it's the value of self-government and of being able to make your own laws, and getting away from the Indian Act is essential. And so that in itself is so much of the work of being able to empower and build your own jurisdictions and sort through your own mechanisms to resolve issues that you face is just so essential. We've built a strong foundation with NStQ over the years, and we've been in treaty negotiations for a long time. And it's taken us too long, and we know that. And we also know that some of the reasons it's taken too long is because some of our mandates and approaches, frankly, haven't worked for the nations that we've been working with. So we've been looking to make lots of changes over the years, changes that are based in large part on the Declaration Act, which brings the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples into the legislative framework of British Columbia. Pretty important piece of work that the province passed in 2019, and also the Recognition and Reconciliation of Rights policy, the RRR policy that Celeste spoke about. That work, those pieces and other pieces have sort of propelled the province into really thinking about negotiations in a new and different way. One example of that, and that includes really trying to listen and listen to partners and listen to what they're telling us. So we're trying to do a bunch of work around revenue sharing and renewing how we approach revenue sharing. And when we sat down and listened, we heard loud and clear about the Laurier Memorial, right? Which was just referenced, and the importance of the Laurier Memorial for your people and the solemn promise that you want to see fulfilled. And that's meaningful for us. And I know that that's on the top of our mind as we think about revenue sharing and other approaches. So, taking the time to learn about that, to understand what that means and how we can reflect that in the work we do is critical. We've made other, changes to treaties, including to ensure that treaties are not frozen in time. It's not an agreement that you can no longer go back and change. So we've created what we call orderly process provisions, so that rights that are proven after a treaty is signed can be brought in to a treaty, for example, through new court decisions, to be able to kind of continue to evolve treaties. We've also introduced, I'd say, a much more robust incremental treaty agreement approach that flow benefits from treaties more quickly to nations. So transferring lands in advance of a treaty agreement to try to ensure nations can receive treaty-related benefits while we're still negotiating. Celeste talked about the shared decision-making approach. One example of that, which we hope will be in the Qelmucw Treaty, will be a consent decision-making agreement for their estuary. And their estuary is where they have a very, very old piece of cultural property that, I think we were able to reach a consent-based decision to try to reflect how to protect that property in the best way. So using new tools to think about how to kind of protect and preserve important areas and pieces of cultural importance to nations. Ending the requirement for nations to give up their tax exemption has been just critical. Forgiving the loans on groups that took on debt to negotiate treaties has been essential. All of these things have happened in the last 3-4 years. So we've shifted the concept of final agreements to one that reflects that we have, I think, what we try to call a living relationship that grows and changes over time, that can be kind of incremental. And that includes working with modern treaty nations who have treaties to reflect that signing a treaty is the beginning of a relationship, not an end to a relationship, and to understand that each nation is on a path that's appropriate for their community. Celeste mentioned the Haida Agreement. It's a good example of that, and we just received royal assent last week in provincial legislature, and the first time in Canadian history that a government has recognized Aboriginal title through a negotiated agreement. But it's not going to be the last time. And I know that that conversation will be really interesting in the treaty process as well. One of the things that I think specifically, I know you've talked about this a lot, but the ranch purchases that we've supported with NStQ have been, I think, a good way of demonstrating that we can find innovative solutions. Over 10,000 hectares of ranch land to NStQ communities in the last 4 years, which we hope provide access to lands, grazing, water rights, and economic opportunities. Those are examples of how we're trying to provide benefits along the negotiation pathway. And we're committed to doing that, and we know there's still more work to do, but that's work that we're absolutely committed to doing with NStQ. I want to close also by acknowledging difficult conversations over the last few months that have happened around the province, that have been racist, that have come through conversations around the Land Act, some of you might be familiar with, and other kinds of conversations. Conversations at different tables that are public around the province. And I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the difficulty that causes for all of us and all of our communities. And I wanted to say that we're committed to supporting everyone in the province in learning about our challenging history, including the history of residential schools, and working together to overcome those legacies of racism. And we know there's work to do there. So I wanted to really acknowledge that on behalf of the province. So I'll stop there and hand it back.
Okay, so I go to a lot of citizens' assemblies and AGMs, go all over the place, and I've never seen a deputy minister wait for an hour or two and then come up, and then, so Tom, I gotta hand it to you. Way to go, good job. Let's give him another hand. And I also see Celeste sticking around, sticking it out. Way to go, Celeste. Yeah, that's really good. So very approachable. If you ever do have a question or anything, but right now we're going to move right along, and I'm looking at my agenda. So I'm going to ask if Emily, and as Emily is approaching, so now Emily and I, come on up, we don't really know each other too well, so I can't really give any details. Now, if it was Dave Miranda for Canada, I could probably go on for 5 or 10 minutes because I know Dave really well. But unfortunately, I understand Dave is not feeling well and couldn't make the trip, so at the last minute, and I do know flus are going around, so he can stay at home, no problem at all. So Emily, please come right up, and the knowledge speaker will say a few words.
Qelmucw, Tom, Matt, the Chayuchtelmans, Emily, and Alia in the seat.
Right on.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to join you today at the 2024 Citizens Assembly. My name is Emily Chamberlain. I'm the provincial negotiator with the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Figured out how to advance the slide. Fantastic. I would like to acknowledge my gratitude for being here today in Secwepemc territory and for being in the territory of Williams Lake First Nation. I would also like to pass on regrets from David Miranda, who is the federal negotiator for Canada, who unfortunately is sick today. This was intended to be a joint presentation between BC and Canada, so I'll be covering his section as well. As this is my first Citizens Assembly in person, I wanted to introduce myself and my role, the team that I work with. So I've been the provincial negotiator for the NStQ treaty negotiations for almost 2 years. I started right at the time where we were concluding the last 2 ranch purchases for NStQ, which was a really exciting time to start. I represent BC at the main table with BC, Canada, and NStQ, and I work with other provincial ministries to deliver on the interests that NStQ raises at the table. My team includes Mark Lofthouse, who is the Chief Negotiator, Patrick Richmond, Senior Negotiator, and Emily Jarrett, Senior Negotiations Analyst. And for Canada, the team includes Gavin Fitch, Chief Federal Negotiator, Wade Henry, and Cooper Dunn, along with David Miranda. So we've covered some of this in some of the previous presentations. Just wanted to recognize that treaties are a long and complex process. As you know, NStQ, BC, and Canada began modern-day treaty negotiations in 1993 and signed an agreement in principle in 2018. A treaty agreement will recognize NStQ ownership and jurisdiction over treaty lands and governance authorities over those lands, will define an ongoing relationship between NStQ, the province, and Canada. Treaty will recognize the right to self-government, set out lawmaking authorities over matters that are integral to NStQ's governance, for example, land use, cultural programs, and public services. They will address Section 35 rights, including rights to self-governance, rights to harvest fish, wildlife, birds, timber, and plants. A treaty will ensure that NStQ First Nations have the lands, resources, and authorities that support self-government, self-determination, and strong government-to-government relationships. A treaty agreement will ensure that your communities benefit from the land and resources in your territory, and this includes land transfers. NStQ, BC, and Canada are negotiating treaty settlement lands, including additional areas of interest that NStQ has identified. We have recently reestablished a lands technical working group who is reviewing those additional areas of interest. We are working to transfer some lands to NStQ communities early in advance of treaty to enable your communities to receive treaty-related benefits while treaty negotiations are ongoing. So this includes land transfers under the incremental treaty agreements to all NStQ communities, which is ongoing. In addition, as mentioned in previous presentations, BC has purchased 4 ranches for the NStQ communities between 2020 and 2022, totaling over 10,000 hectares of land. The nations own the cattle and equipment, they manage the ranches, and the ranch lands will form part of an eventual NStQ treaty. These ranch purchases have been an innovative approach we've taken, providing economic opportunities for the communities and returning land to your communities. So both Tom and Celeste have highlighted some of these substantial shifts we've seen in modern treaty making. And I'd like to highlight a bit more about some of these changes in the context of NStQ treaty negotiations and our discussions at the table. So on the screen are some of the highlights of some of the key items that we have or will be discussing at the NStQ treaty table. This includes the more technical recognition and predictability, which is the recognition of NStQ rights and title in treaty and how we move forward as 3 governments. Celeste and Tom had both also referenced shared decision-making. This is a topic of conversation between BC, Canada, and NStQ. And this includes increased opportunities for shared decision-making or co-management within NStQ territory outside of treaty settlement lands. So those discussions are ongoing right now. At our negotiating table, NStQ, BC, and Canada have started working through a number of these new policy and mandate initiatives, and so far they have been well received by your treaty team. Over the coming months, we will be bringing forward more of these new approaches, especially in the fiscal areas. We're confident that by next year's Citizens' Assembly, your treaty team will be in a position to share the details of all of these new approaches with you and how they relate to NStQ treaty. This slide here provides you with a snapshot of some of the pieces of the puzzle the negotiating table is working on. I'm sure the treaty team will have more details to provide you during their presentations and updates. For BC and Canada, we feel that the table has gotten its legs underneath us for the past few months, as your team, the federal team, and the provincial team have all gone through some personnel changes over the last year and a half. The table is taking an approach of working through some important chapters in the treaty agreement, using the agreement in principle as a foundation, and building upon any new developments in language and approaches since the agreement in principle was signed. As noted earlier, we have started to roll out some of the new policy approaches, which is why the general provisions is a chapter we'll be tackling soon, and the co-management chapter discussions are underway right now. We're also pleased that the Lands Technical Working Group is up and going. The Lands Technical Working Group is continuing the work started a number of years ago and is working through interests in additional treaty settlement land, both east and west of the Fraser. We are pleased that Fisheries is returning to the table after too long of a hiatus, and we are confident and hopeful that over the coming 6 to 9 months, we will be able to work through most of the chapters, clearly lay out where we have an agreement, identify the areas where each of the parties still has work to do. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. If you have any questions, please follow up with myself, with David, or with the treaty team. Qelmucw.
All righty, thank you, Emily. So we're going to move this right along. I'm going to mention if you do have to take a break, you don't hesitate to go use the washroom or go grab a coffee or whatever, but we're going to try to move this along. I don't think it's possible to have a break, so my apologies. But as well, there will be, at the end of the day, more prizes, I understand, so that'll give you some motivation, because I know after a big lunch, things do slow down a little bit. So with that said, I'm going to invite the Chief Negotiator, as well as the treaty team negotiators, to come right on up. We're going to go into just a quick Q&A session, and then we will then move into the Indigenous Law Research Unit, and then at the end of the day, the Northern Secwepemc Cultural Society. Qelmucw, thank you.
Ma Qelmucw Qelmucw Qukstep treaty team.
I got 4. Yeah, just the 4 questions. Okay. And if you do have any more questions, there are some sheets that are available. And please I understand Chris or someone, Chris is right there. He can pick up those questions. And Geraldine Bob is here. She's part of the TRU programs. I understand she has a booth as well. So that's just a little bit of the housekeeping as well as information sharing. So Geraldine Bob is here. I don't know if she's literally here right now or she's out there in the booth. So that's part of the TRU programs. Okay, we have a microphone. Okay, so here's question number 1. So all of them are pretty direct questions. The Chief Negotiator told NStQ Assembly, we're looking at maybe another 4+ years to finalize or negotiate. How much longer do you expect for this to be finalized?
Possibly 3, and I'm optimistic there because it's been our experience there that anytime there is a federal election or a provincial election, there's a period of a limbo period before and a limbo period after. The big word is interregnum until. And one of our concerns is, who is going to get it. Sometimes, that helps us, and sometimes, it's part of it becomes one of the challenges. We haven't, to be honest, there we haven't had lands on the table. We discussed water briefly. We discussed forestry briefly. The lands, I think, the lands chapter itself and lands quantum are going to be big ones. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, is there anything additional, or does that cover it? Okay. Okay, so does each NStQ community have self-government workers as well as staff for off-reserve membership?
We have off-reserve liaisons in the Lower Mainland and in Kamloops, and we have a liaison here in Williams Lake that looks after the North. When it comes to self-government directors or coordinators, transition coordinators, Scotland has one. Cannon Lake has not. Right at the current moment, it's a vacancy. Williams Lake First Nation has one, and Haldance hasn't had one for many years.
Okay, does that cover it? Okay, great, thank you. The third one is more of a comment. AGM assemblies should ensure reporting of actual progress or delays and achievement for past year. I didn't know if anybody wanted to respond to that. It was just a matter, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. And this is where we take information or comments like this so we can improve the following year. And we do provide update reports on accomplishments and achievements and stuff to our leadership, but it's also very important through community meetings or urban meetings to provide that input to our membership too, so they can see what the challenges are and those successes. So yeah, a very good point, and something that we'll keep note of.
Okay, anything further?
It's been a really challenge, sir, as was previously mentioned by our Kukpi, sir, that we've faced losses in our community over the past few months, sir. I've had three community level meetings that I've had to cancel because of that. So it's and the latest one was I was trying to get a meeting in before we came here to kind of upgrade people there, but we honor the family wishes if they decide they don't want a meeting in a community at the same time that they're dealing with their loved one, and we honor that.
Okay, so this one is the $100 question. I think that's pretty much on a lot of people's mind. Why is there such a big turnover of staff, of people that were let go or left NStQ or the Tribal Council?
Changeover happens, and one of the things people have to look out for their health and things and make decisions based on that and moving forward. Yes, the rumor is there's a lot of changeover right now, but we can rebuild and build it strategically going forward so that we have a strong team. So I can't crystal ball why people are leaving and stuff, but I mean, we can build a strong team going forward.
Okay. Anybody else, or is that good?
We have more people working now than we did when we were in the earlier stages about 20 years ago. So, and that's just the way it is. And sometimes, change is opportunity for somebody else to come and fill in the space. Kukpi7.
Wade, and thank you for the questions. I believe that speaks to funding over the years too. I know that's something that's on a lot of the team's mind and some of our leaders' minds, is that funding aspect. I think in order to create what we want to see within our team, then it will take funding in order to be able to do that and to have the right people at the table in order to do the bidding on behalf of our nations. So I think that's one of the areas that we are lacking, and I think that's one area that we continue to push because we are growing and our nations are growing and the concern is growing with the time. So all of those things come into balance, and I think the balance within our team, but the balance within everything around us too, with the governments, it's all about timing in certain ways, but when has it ever been easy for us? When has it ever been that easy for us to come across the line in certain ways to find that? But we are still here and we are still doing the work. I mean, look at some of our team members. They've been here since we've started this whole process. So I think that has to have acknowledgement too on their consistency and the repetitiveness to be here and to be teaching me and mentoring me to be in this position. But we're always welcoming to have more team members. So definitely the young ones or whoever in our communities that want to step up and to be in these positions, I think we're definitely here to, and I'll mentor you if you're a part of my team, or the same thing for any of the other teams, that there are openings and we do have those job descriptions at our table too. And I was curious and I wanted to be a part of the change, and that's why I'm up here today, is to be a part of that change and then to find the solutions and to be proactive to get to where we all want to be at the end of the day. So, Qelmucw.
Yep, Qelmucw, thank you. A question for the province for Tom or Emily. Once BC has taken land off the table, and I'm just paraphrasing here, okay? The land is taken, I should say, and made into a park. So land is taken and made into a park. Is it off the treaty table permanently, or can we get it back if there was some land identified in parks?
So I can start things off, and Tom, feel free to jump in. So through treaty, there are opportunities if a nation or if NStQ has an interest in areas that have been identified as a park, to bring that in as part of treaty settlement land. We would need to explore what the interests are in that area. We would need to seek specific mandates for that. We would need to engage quite deeply with Ministry of Environment and BC Parks in those discussions. They'd want an understanding about what the nation's interests are. Are there other alternative lands that could be considered? Are these the only lands? Are there other arrangements that might meet those interests? So I mean, there have been some examples where parks have been brought into treaty. It's not impossible, but there's a process, and we need to get specific mandates within government to be able to fully explore. So.
That's great. That's a great answer. The only thing I would add is we are also doing a lot more management with nations around parks, right? So if there's a park in a territory that's of interest, but maybe the nation also wants to keep it protected in a way that meets conservation objectives of the province and the nation. And like there's been examples where we've transferred land, returned land to the nation where the nation's maintained it as a park. And that's a great outcome that kind of works for everyone. If the nation has other objectives other than kind of protection and conservation, as Emily says, you know, we work through that process and what the interests are too. So there's sort of opportunities for returning lands, co-management as well. And it sort of depends on the nature of the interest that we can explore at the table. So trying to kind of be more open to different alternatives.
Liz?
Want all of that in writing? Or a greater role in parks management to create opportunities for our people? And seriously, a lot of those parklands, you know, sit over the places that have place names. Like we always mention the late Joseph Archie, you know, who shared a lot of his information, you know, and being part of the Archie Brothers trop line, they had names for all of their areas. But that said, we got pushed all over the map there at Canham there when we were looking at specific lands, or because a lot of it was already private lands. So it's kind of hard to know where else to look, you know, and yeah, though I rode horseback through those, a number of us did, they look good.
Okay, thank you. And we're running out of time. There's still some questions, so I'm going to get through this as quick. Gordon, this one's on the Hatsuo. How much further ahead do we need to get in treaty before we're actually ready for the treaty? So this might be something in terms of self-government or where we're at in negotiations. Yeah, I know it's, how much further ahead do we have to be in treaty before we're actually ready for that treaty? It's kind of a, yeah.
I'm trying to understand the question, but it's a bit cryptic, but I'm going to give my best attempt. One of the things that we're doing at Hatsuth right now is internally we're working on amending our election codes and stuff. After that is done, then we'll be working on our governance manuals and other bylaws that may have to be in place. So those are all things working towards self-government. So when we get down that path and having all the internal work sort of done and stuff, there's lots more to it. Like, I mean, working on the Blue Lake ITA parcel. Like, I mean, we have that. Now we got to start looking at how strategically we're going to develop that. And right now we're almost finishing off with the Gardens or the Whiskey Creek ITA parcel. So again, that's more land that we have and we can be working on developing. But governance is the big thing that I think we have to achieve to be successful. Without a good governance, we're setting ourselves up for failures in certain areas. That's about all I can say. And whoever it is can come talk to me later.
Okay, that was just for Hatsuo. Who will pay for the the forest fires, for fighting the forest fires? And they were saying currently the AIP says the NStQ will have to pay for 1/5, or I think it's 1/5, be 1/3. Sorry. So, who will pay for the forest fires, especially if we get a treaty?
That's a point that still has to be negotiated and stuff. We currently, the provincial government looks after the cost of wildfires and going forward. But in a post-treaty environment, when we have the treaty in place, there will be a cost sharing similar to that Canada has with the old parks and stuff in certain parks. Canada and the province have agreements on cost sharing those sort of issues. So that's a negotiation we haven't had yet, and it will be coming in the future. But right at the current time, if there's a wildfire, it's the province that's covering those costs.
In our own culture, their fire's not too bad, or if it doesn't burn right through. But these days, it's hard to know there because it's so dry. But originally, our people used to do cultural burning.
Okay, thank you. And where can we read the updated AIP, Agreement in Principle?
Currently, you can get updated Agreement in Principle on the BC Treaty Commission's website. It's also on the provincial government website, and it's also on the NStQ website, I believe. And if not, come and speak to your treaty managers, and they will get you a copy of the updated Agreement in Principle with the appendices.
Okay, so that concludes. There's a number of questions. I've noted the questions, and I apologize that we couldn't get through them. And what I'm going to do is note them, and then we're going to get some responses. I'll know by tomorrow how we can respond accordingly, whether that's something I can present really quickly tomorrow, or if we can get the treaty team, we could squeeze them in again. Okay, so I'm going to have to do that. My apologies. Oh, sorry.
You've already voted on the Agreement in Principle. It's done. It's a foundation for Qelmucw, Qelmucw is what we're trying to refer to. And we're not saying final agreement. We're going through the chapters, or we're eliminating final agreement and we're putting in this agreement. That's the language we're updating. We have a developed process that we have looked at each AIP chapter. We summarize the chapter. We say what has been agreed to. We say what is outstanding. We list what's our objectives. We list places where there's gaps. And then we say to ourselves, do we in fact have all of the latest information? Is there anything else that we should have? We look at federal, what the federal role is. We look at the provincial role, what their role is. We look at court cases. We look at UNDRIP. So we look at all of those things, and those are in a single called chapter summary that we have developed. It's a lot of work there, but we'll be getting. I've done a couple more. I'll be getting them to you.
Okay, Qelmucw. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. And as mentioned, you can leave the stage now. Again, appreciate all the hard work. Yes. Okay, and just to emphasize, because we couldn't get through all the questions, so we're going to paraphrase some of the questions. We'll have some of those answers and present it tomorrow as well. We're going to squeeze that in. Now I'm going to ask the, excuse me, as I look through, the Indigenous Law Research Unit to come on down. And again, I will let the ladies introduce themselves, and so I don't have to go on and on and on. So, yeah, you don't want me going on. And before you come up, the knowledge speaker.
Qelmucw treaty team, and now Lachaich Dolmans, the Tara, as Jessica, Naelia.
Oh, sure. Play musical chairs. Shem.
Are we going to do this? Should we do this? Oh my goodness, like it's a show. Bonjour, Tanse. We're behind, so we were going to present for an hour, but we're going to try and do it for less time. There it is. Oh, it's so bright. Oh, we can even see. It's like a TV station. So bonjour, Tanse. My name is Tara Williamson. I'm a member of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation in Treaty 5. I was raised in Qelmucw, Swan Lake, Manitoba in Treaty 1. And my dad is from Beardy's Okamassis in Treaty 6. So when you talk about treaty, I'm a treaty person, and I'm also an adopted member of the House of Gladliasila of the Qelmucw Nation under Himas Frank Brown. I am a co-research director at the Indigenous Law Research Unit. We're going to tell you about ourselves and more about ourselves. Here's some other stuff. I went to school, I taught some places, and I've been with the Indigenous Law Research Unit since 2019 and the co-research director since 2021.
Why? My name is Jessica Ash. I am a settler of Jewish and Irish descent. My family came to Turtle Island at the turn of the last century and settled in the United States, and then my parents came to Treaty 6 territory in the 1970s, where I was born. And I've been living in the Lekwungen territory and where Victoria is for the last 25 years, on and off. It's a pleasure to be back in Secwepemc. It's a pleasure to be here, Qelmucw, to everyone who's invited us. I've been research director at the Indigenous Law Research Unit since 2015. Tara and I went to law school together. So I'm a lawyer by trade, and we'll tell you a little bit more about what it is we do as we speed along. So, yeah, and that's more information about me. All right, so what brings us here today? We want to talk to you a little bit about the relationship that we've been building with NStQ over the last few years. We're going to explain a little bit about what the Indigenous Law Research Unit is. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the definition, some vocabulary around Indigenous law, how we understand Indigenous law. And we're going to focus in on one aspect of our work, which is working with stories, working with oral narratives to draw up principles of law. In this case, Secwepemc stories to build frameworks for governance purposes, what laws are within the stories. Oh, that's fine, yeah. Right, so what brings us here? First slide. So we've been talking, we've been visiting. Hank and I have been visiting a long time. Since about 2018, we started conversations about how is it that Secwepemc law could be stood up and worked with for the purposes of not just negotiations, but once there is a treaty in place, how it could stand up treaty. So we talked for a couple of years. There was an interruption from COVID, priorities shift. And then in last October, what we decided we'd do is our team, so Tara and me, and there are two other folks who are at our table out there, go visit them, Mercedes and Shannon. We came for a 2-day workshop to introduce ILRU's work and how we carry out our research. We do this with every project we do because we want people to be really clear about how it is we engage with their law, how it is we work with your stories. We want to show you, be transparent about it, and look for people who may want to join us in that work, right? We want to be transparent. It was also an opportunity for us to identify a path for how we might move forward if we take on a project together.
I'm not allowed to work the clicker because we were at a conference a couple months ago and I just made a terrible, terrible mess of it. So just to be clear, while we have studied Secwepemc law and we've worked with it and we've worked with we've been so lucky to work with stories and language and beyond the land and have people come to us. We are not experts in your law and we're not going to tell you about your law, but we are going to tell you about how we get there. What is some of the things that we do to try and get to the heart of Indigenous law? So I'm not going to spend much time on this because we're truncating it. We're just going to make it shorter for all of us. This is who we are. We're housed at the University of Victoria. We're arm's length though, and we receive independent funding, so that really helps us in the work that we're able to do. We partner with and support Indigenous communities who come to us. So we don't go out chasing work, and there's a lot of work. But we wait until people come to us and say, how can we partner? Because we believe in that kind of partnership. And what we do is we develop resources and processes to help people use their own laws in contemporary ways. So we know the law has been there forever. We know this had some interruptions because of colonialism, but we know it's still there. So how do we help put it back together in a way that's recognizable to people in community and also people outside of community? There's a translation process. We have some of our resources, in fact, upstairs at our ILRU table. This is right in the way. You'll notice that there are 3 different Secwepemc reports, actually. This is the most recent one. We worked with SNTC on laws of belonging and family, so citizenship. This is one we call it the Blue Book. It's been around for a few years now on lands and resources. One of the very first projects that ILRU ever did actually came out of the TRC, and there were a handful of smaller reports that were done. And this was done with NStQ and Northern Secwepemc law. So it's one of the it really is like the first thing that happened with ILRU. We've recently, it's actually not quite released, but the cover is done. On Denezhu law, Trondek law from the Yukon on human rights. And by human rights, what we really are talking about is the balancing of power and relationship. And Nwendowin is a family law from Anishinaabe territory. So these are some examples of like these are 2 to 5 year projects that go in-depth research in community and with community.
Yeah, so these are the projects that communities have come to us and have been community-led. We also do a lot of public legal education. We create curricula for the law school at UVic, as well as in the broader community and for the legal profession as well. We've created introductions to Indigenous law there for the law profession. We also do lots of training. Most recently, we've been asked a lot about how it is you do ethical research with Indigenous communities, what that looks like.
Hello, I'm back. So, real quick, the difference between Aboriginal and Indigenous law. So, Aboriginal law, Aboriginal is defined in the Constitution in Section 35. Aboriginal law refers to Canadian law as it applies to Aboriginal people. So, when we're talking about Indigenous law, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about Canadian law. We're not talking about duty to consult. We're not talking even really about treaty. We're not talking about rights or title. What we are talking about are the legal traditions and orders that come from this land and people and waters and territory, and that have been here since we've been here, because society can't survive without law. So we know that if we're still here, it means law has been here as well. Indigenous is a broad international legal term. It's recently been defined in BC through DRIPA, and it does define it as Aboriginal. So this is starting to make our work a little bit confusing. But when you're visiting with us and we're talking about Indigenous law, we're talking about Secwepemc law, or we're talking, so there isn't just one big Indigenous law, right? There's Secwepemc law, there's Gitxsan law, there's Coast Salish law, and so that's what we're referring to. Still me. So what is Indigenous law? Indigenous law is a process. It's an intellectual process of deliberation, of speaking amongst each other, and using reasoning to apply principles, thoughts, and laws to a specific context. It's a way, like I said, we can't survive without law. So the fact that there's all these Secwepemc people in a room means that for generations and generations, the law has kept people together in a way that helps people make decisions and again, have those processes. As I mentioned before, we know that colonization has done a number on all kinds of things, but it hasn't erased it completely. You have language speakers, you have the land, you have your stories, you have dancing, you have songs. There's still so many things that the law is alive in. And so that's what we focus on, is what do we still have and how do we rebuild it?
So our starting point is that Indigenous law must inform all processes today. So whether that's engagement within community, thinking about internal governance processes, policies, programs, any sort of implementation of law, Secwepemc law should be the heart of it. We also believe it should be the part of rebuilding or reimagining how societies are built, how governance is built today. And it should form the basis for relating to other peoples and state governments. So the question is, how does Secwepemc law get introduced into the negotiation process? What are Secwepemc legal principles for that? Or when treaty is stood up, how is Secwepemc law going to inform how that treaty is built? So this is our tree. So we think of Indigenous law as a rooted tree. This is our tree diagram. It's an arbutus tree, which is important in the territory where we live right now. And at the bottom, the roots are the sources of law, where law comes from in the world. It's authority. Where is the authority? So whether that's the sacred or customary law, or the natural world, or deliberation when people are debating the law together, or how we treat one another. Those are the sources of law. That's where it comes from. And then in the branches, in the trees, we think of that as where law is expressed in the world, where you can find it, where you can engage with it. And I know it's really hard to see, but some of the resources that we think of when we think of where law is laid down is in the land, right? Law in the land, law in the stories, law in people, in art, in dances. That's where Indigenous law can be seen. And at the top of the tree, we think about the applications. So where law can be implemented today, where Secwepemc law can be implemented today. So whether that's policy or legislation, ceremonies and gatherings or governance, treaty negotiations, or at government-to-government tables. More and more we're seeing how important it is to be thinking about Indigenous law and how that informs the government-to-government agreements happening today. Ooh, and now we're on story work.
That was a lot. We did that in half the amount of time. I also want to clarify as well, and we heard some feedback as well at our table, that we understand the challenge of English, and that the word law might not be the best word, and that it might not encompass all of those things. And so that is also part of our process, is figuring out what does it mean when we sit with community partners, what is it that we mean by law? Okay. So this is, Rob Clifford is a legal scholar, a Saanich legal scholar. I'm not going to read it because I think you all know about this, but one of the things that we're known for, but it's certainly not our only, the only method that we use, is our story work analysis and our narrative analysis. And so stories are not just myths or legends or traditions. Stories have survived this long because they have important things to tell us. And so this is just a quote we think is really beautiful about the stories as relationships, stories as agents of change, stories as, I love the quote, it's relational, it is in short the song and the echo, and contains the resonance of all the echoes that came since. And so one of the things in our workshops and what we did when we were here in October with NStQ is we looked through a bunch of Secwepemc stories and we started drawing out principles of law and putting them together just to show what a little piece of what it is that we do. So we would like to tell a story or read a story. I wonder, there's going to be a word in here that I don't know how to pronounce. But I'm gonna fumble my way through, and maybe our language speaker can help me when I get there. It's grasshopper. So this is, as you know, I'm sure, James Tate is well known for documenting many stories. So this is a short story we picked. It's the story of grasshopper. It'll be on the next page. I'll cue you. I'll practice. I'll try. So, grasshopper lived with the people who were busy catching and curing salmon. They said to him, "Come help us. It is the salmon season. We must all work that we may have a plentiful store of salmon for the winter." Grasshopper answered, "No, I do not like to work. I like to amuse myself playing, jumping, and making a noise." "I do not need salmon. I like to eat grass, of which there is great plenty all around here." Soon winter came, and the grass was all covered deep with snow. Then Grasshopper was cold and hungry. Finding nothing to eat and being in a starving condition, he begged the people to give him some dried salmon. This they refused to do, telling him to go and play and eat grass. When he was nearly dead, they transformed him, saying, "Henceforth you shall be the grasshopper." Taka-taka? Yeah, pretty close. Taka-taka. There we go. We just learned a word for grasshopper today. "And as you were too lazy and thoughtless to catch salmon, you shall live on grass and spend your time jumping around and making much noise." We've all met a grasshopper in our life. So the very first thing we do before we get into sort of a more systematic, rigorous analysis is we just stop and think to ourselves, what does this story make you think of? What is it? How does it make you think? And we've heard so many interesting responses. We just having the opportunity to think about a story. Normally we do some engagement, but what does it make you think of?
Sorry, that was
He's like, I don't know. I was trying to focus on the word grasshopper.
Is the word we use. Qelmucw. Yeah, for grasshopper.
Qelmucw. Qelmucw. Okay. There you go. Okay, thank you. See, and then we would go and learn more about the word and maybe where the word comes from and other words it might be connected to. But this is where we start, just to have a discussion.
Right. So then the obvious question is, how do we as outsiders to a legal tradition, whether you're from Anishinaabe territory or a settler like me, what do you do, right? If we have a story, we're faced with a story, we don't live in the context of a community, we have not heard this story, we don't know the right word for grasshopper even. What do we do? So what we do is we borrow tools from elsewhere. It's really important for us to do as much homework as we possibly can before we talk to people, because we want to have intelligent conversations and not just wander into communities and say, "Tell us about your law." We want to have nuanced conversations and not waste people's time, not overtax them. So we've borrowed tools from different legal traditions. This is from a Western legal tradition. And it really helps us ask questions of the story so we can get answers from the story to help us think about law, about what the legal principles are. So there are really, this is called the adapted legal narrative analysis for those lawyers in the audience. This is adapted from the case brief method. So we ask one question of a story. There are many questions to ask. We ask one. Then we think about what facts matter. What's the background that matters to answer the question? Then we think about what is decided or how is the issue resolved. So if we think of the problem as the question, the decision is the answer, and then we get to the reason, and the reason is the why. Why was that decided? Why is that the resolution? And sometimes it's really clear in the story, and sometimes we have to connect the dots a little bit. So we'll show you how we do this with Grasshopper. And our bracket, this is really, really important. This is a place where we put all of our questions. So if we know we're lacking information, we don't have all the context, we might put something in there like, is Grasshopper a community member? Or, how is he a youth? What's going on here? We might put all of our questions in there. So we're gonna go through and just show you in brief what we did with the story of Grasshopper. So the question we asked, again, could be many questions to ask. The question we asked for this one is, what is an appropriate response to individuals who are not contributing to a communal need? Does this make sense as a question to ask, Grasshopper? Yeah, okay, good, got a couple nods. So the background information that's important, so all the background that's important before answering the decision, we've identified. People ask Grasshopper to help them catch and cure salmon during the salmon season. Grasshopper refused, saying he did not need salmon because he ate grass, of which there was plenty. He would rather jump, play, and make noise. And soon winter came and the grass was covered with snow. Grasshopper had nothing to eat and was starving, so he begged the people to give him dry salmon. So we know that's the background context to determine the answer to how do people respond to an individual like this in community. Still me? Still me. So what happened? We see that the people did not share their food with Grasshopper when he was hungry. They told him to go jump and play and eat grass in the winter. And when Grasshopper was nearly dead, the people transformed Grasshopper into a common grasshopper who would only eat grass and who would jump around making noise. So that's what happened. Those were the decisions. That's the resolution.
So then we have to try and figure out why. Why were these the decisions? Oh, I'm hitting Jess in the head. I'm not a very good Vanna White. Why did the community make these decisions? So we know from the story, it says the people didn't share their food because he was too lazy and thoughtless. So if he wanted to access fish in the winter, he should have helped, right? That seems pretty clear. So what we take from that is we take a principle and we said it's not stated explicitly, this is what's stated, but we think that means you can't, we've taken it to mean individuals can exercise self-determination. Absolutely, Grasshopper, we're not gonna force you to help us. But the community has needs and there are going to be consequences to exercising self-determination. So you have to balance that, the collective with the individual. Another one is that there seems to be an obligation here in reciprocity to help each other and share in the work of community. And when you don't fulfill that obligation, again, there are consequences. So this is just a short story, one short question that we've asked it. And then we also realized we have so many questions. Here are some of our questions. What happened after he was transformed? How did he not know there were changing seasons? Like, did he not know the grass wasn't going to be there forever? Was there something else the community could have done? Had they tried teaching him already? Should people have taught, should he have gotten another chance? How old is Grasshopper? Is Grasshopper a little kid? Or is Grasshopper an adult? Was Grasshopper a member of the community or was he an outsider? And we ask these questions, just ask them. And maybe we have those conversations in community because this might tell us more about the law. What we might find out was, oh, actually, we know another story about Grasshopper, and Grasshopper's a little kid. And actually, we should have spent more time teaching him. Here's another story. And we start to piece these things together in this sort of constellation of stories to try and get a better understanding of what the legal principles are. So with that one story, let's say we do that. We'll start out reading like 100 stories. Often, if there's that many in a legal tradition, or hearing stories, we'll narrow it down to 20, 30, 40, 50, and we'll do this method, which each of those stories in a group. And then what we do is we take the issues, facts, resolutions, all those things we were looking at, and we change them into some of these categories. They can be other categories. This is the one we're showing you. But so, for example, who were the legal decision makers in this story of Secwepemc law? Well, the community made a decision. They were a decision maker. What were the processes? They reached out. They helped them. It's important to reach out to your relations and be reciprocal. What were the responsibilities to help out? What sort of rights or expectations do people have? What are some legal responses? This response was it was harsh, but they didn't let him, he didn't have to die. They just changed him. They transformed him, right? And then what happens is, as we do this more and more, we start to come across some general underlying principles. So those things that keep coming up over and over and over again in the stories. Often these are really big principles, things like love and respect and kindness, but we still have to define what those are according to the law.
All right. And then so after we've done that work of looking at lots of stories, trying to create these headings where we're thinking about decision makers, thinking about processes and principles to guide legal decision making, that's when we bring our homework into community. So we have focus group conversations with people who are knowledgeable and wish to share. So anyone who wishes to share. Focus groups for the most part, because we know law is deliberative. It happens when more than one person is in conversation. So we like to have circles of conversations about the stories sometimes, and sometimes about the tentative framework or those categories in those sessions. After we do all of the work, we have a validation process where we go back to every single person we've ever spoken with and make sure that we've used the words in a good way, that we've used the words in a way that people feel comfortable with. They have every right to pull those quotes that we've used or change them in any way, shape, or form.
And I just want to add, even that real quick exercise, we get told wrong a lot, right? That's part of the process. So even in doing that, if you're like, no, that's not really what I think Secwepemc law is, we're like, great, then tell us more. And we'll talk to you more about it. And so we can have that conversation and help. So just so you know, when we come and do that ground truthing, we're very prepared to be wrong.
We have thick skin. You have to. Oh, this is me, okay. So we want to point out that, of course, there are many ways of engaging and learning about Indigenous law. This is just one, story-based learning. There are also practices, land-based learning. There's, of course, art, beading, shawls. There's spiritual learning, ceremonies, sweat lodges, dreams. Of course, language. We work a lot with language. In the last report we did with SNTC, we worked with Secwepemc speakers a lot and tried to use Secwepemc as much as possible in the principles. So identifying a principle of Qelmucw, we wrote it in the language because it encompassed more than what English could provide. And then, of course, interviewing elders and knowledge sharers. So this is an example. This is an oldie. This is the blue book that we did alongside SNTC. So it's an application. This is what it ends up looking like. So for this one, we had 30 stories. We had 10 focus groups. We had 23 different Secwepemc voices in it. Lots of authors and contributors. 110 pages on the subject of lands and resources law in the Secwepemc legal order. Alongside of it, because often we have access to the stories that we're working with, but community does not. You have to go to the law library or go to some weird library to find it and download it or ask for it. So we publish the stories alongside of the report so people can have access to them. And in this case, we also organized all of the stories according to a theme. So there's a theme on accessing or harvesting resources and hunting, and we bundled a whole bunch of stories together. So if people want to look at a whole bunch of stories on harvesting, there's a set of stories to begin with. The last thing we added was a glossary of terms in Secwepemc that are used in the report. So this is helpful on its own for thinking about how language and law influence one another and how it helps frame it. Back to our conversation about what is the word law. Okay.
Fighting over the mic on stage, trying to tell people we're good to work with, and we're fighting over the mic. You guys, we're almost done. I'm sorry that was so fast. I'm impressed with us. One of the things we do want to make sure you know, this method, when we work with these reports, we have no intellectual property over your law or over your stories. We share the reports for publishing, we use them for education purposes, and we use them to show other people, you can do this too. And so, just so it's clear, we don't replace your law. This isn't codifying law. This isn't saying this is your be-all, end-all law, everything in here. It's just a starting point and a tool. And the goal is that you take it and you use it. And we'll often do implementation workshops with people and communities once the reports are done. We also don't just do reports, as Jess pointed out. Like, we'll see some of our resources. We've done toolkits and educational resources as well. The point of it, though, is that it analyzes the information in a methodical, highly structured, transparent, rigorous way. And the idea is that it's supposed to be accessible. So we had one report, the Nwendowin, the Anishinaabe report, they asked us, they said, make it legalese, because we have to take this to court, and we have to use it with cops and lawyers and probation officers, and we want it to sound like Western law. So we said, okay, so that's how we wrote it. And then we have Nithwa, who says, we need children to understand this. And so we do our best to make the work accessible and listen to what it is that you need, and so that you're able to apply it. And again, the idea is just that it is a framework and it's a starting point, and hopefully the work continues. And it is, we finished before we were supposed to. So miigwech, kucham, thank you. Jess, do you have anything to add?
Kuchchacham.
Oh my!
Oh yeah,
They're walking around with the microphone now.
Yeah.
But these ladies are wonderful. They got us back on schedule, on top of all that work. Like, let's give them another hand. Wow. Okay, anything you want to say?
Just good step, good Terras, Jessica. As gegooid, is gekloed.
Okay, thank you, Qelmucw, very much. Okay, we're moving right along. The last subject of the day. We're going to ask Graham Wesley and Irene Gilbert to come on up. The Northern Secwepemc Cultural Society, a core group of volunteers and interests in the language, history, culture, traditions. They had a dream come true, which basically is a funding announcement at the end of March. So, and I know that's what it says there. I'm just go. What? Oh, okay, I take that back. Now I got to go find funding. Okay, I'll let her take it away. My apologies.
Kultens is Qelmucw gejas NSCS, Gagwistes, Kultens, Lekaes is Kultens as Quanamtens as Qelmucw na Perskaps, NSCS, Skachtem, the Clouds is Knuchentum, Goy, Met Legaich Tolums, Irene Gilbert.
Wait. Wait, Irene Winsquext, Qelmucw, Glawa, Wengakacha, George Abbey, Wengikha, Ella Gilbert. I'm from the Eskin First Nation. I was born in Qelmucw. I grew up there till I was 14, and then I moved to Canam Lake when I was 16. So I've been there since. Not too sure how this thing works. Okay, got it. So he wants me to. So I'm the president of the Northern Secwepemc Cultural Society. We just finished our board meeting just a few minutes ago. Carrie Chelsea was going to be the speaker, but he had another engagement, so he wasn't able to attend. This is the cultural site, probably last May. This is how it looked. This is before the construction started. We've been working on this probably since 2003, but we didn't become a society until 2006. This is our board members. Harold Duncan, he sits on the board. He's from Qelmucw. Alana Dixon, she's our interim manager for the Cultural Center. Me, president. Carrie Chelsea, he's our vice president. Dora Demures, she sits on our board. Irvin Johnson, and Graham Leslie's our secretary. I don't know if Graham, are you here? Oh, he's way in the back. So we had a groundbreaking ceremony last May 5th, 2023. This is when Agnes was still part of our group. She's been a member for a long time, as so many others in this room have been on the board. So our name of our center, we just passed the name today. The board passed it. Qelmucw, our culture of long ago. The Northern Secwepemc Society presents of 5 proud Northern Secwepemc nations which created a vision in 2004, incorporates as a society in 2006, and has worked tirelessly since then to reach its first stage of the goal, which is to construct the building. Numerous members of the 5 participating First Nations have contributed to this achievement, supported by leaders of their community, without which this building would not exist. So it is our leadership and our members that have gotten us this far. From the Eskin First Nation, from Eskedem First Nation, from Qelmucw First Nation, from Williams Lake First Nation, Qelmucw, from Qelmucw, Dog Creek, Canoe Creek. Right now, I'll just talk probably about just when, probably 2021 is when Canam Lake completed their story with David Jensen and group to talk about what we wanted our story to be shown, or our exhibits to look like when we completed our building. So this is a few pictures of a little bit of our story and one of the meetings that we did have. I did have David Jensen meet with every sector of my community, our health center, our daycare, our band staff, our UNP students, our school, language speakers, elders. Like, I brought him to every part of our community and got the stories and looked at all of our collections. And I found when I did our story at Jeskin, that I found that our elders today a little bit lost some of the stories that our elders back in the archives had told. So I hired a young lady to come in and just go through our archives and pull out stories, pull out things that she would like to see in our cultural center. And then she did a report up to David Jensen. So I'm very proud and very happy, and I was very touched by the story that David Jensen told about Jeskin. This is Qelmucw. David Jensen went to work with Qelmucw, Canoe Creek, Dog Creek, and this is just touching on, I was looking at their story, and it's a very beautiful story. And I think they finished last March when their story was completed by David Jensen. I think there was a little added to it, but and there probably still can be more added to it because they have a rich history too. A sketch story is being designed and is expect completion March 2025. So this is just a picture of them when David Jensen and group went out to their community, and they just went out probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They just were out as sketch gathering information and stories to put into their content. We'd like to thank very much Qelmucw. This is our opportunity to recognize and thank those primarily responsible for construction of this building, starting with all of those who served as directors of the society and several chiefs, elected band councillors. Graham was having a good time walking around and talking to previous board members from each of the communities. He was so happy to be talking to, I can't even remember, I just remember him talking to a lot of people, and they're, if you don't mind me pointing you out, I can't even see anybody right now, but we had so many board members. Oh, Agnes Jack was one of our board members, and Rhonda Phillips was one of our board members, and Dora Demers was a board member previously, and she came back to us. She's on the board now, and Chris Wycott was on the board, and like there's just so many. I know that Graham has a list that when we do our opening, that we will be contacting, inviting you to the opening. We want to thank very much McFarland Marcio. They're the ones that designed the building, the architects, and we've been meeting with them and our construction manager and construction team bi-weekly for the past year. And our construction team is Alfred Horry Construction. They have worked exceptional work has not only resulted in this wonderful building, but in times of continuous escalating costs, they've managed to carry the project under budget. So we're coming under budget, which is good. We moved the date of our completion of our building date to late August because we're just still, there's construction still happening. The ground is still being worked on. So we're not having our completion celebration on June 7th. I just got directed by our board that they would like to have it Friday, September 6th, 2024. So that's the new date for celebration of our building. It'll give us time to make sure, like, the ground will be good, the grass will be grown, and things will be in place properly. We don't want to bring you out there and you won't be able to walk here or move here. We want it to be totally complete so you can really enjoy the building. Just a few pictures. This is our live roof. We've just got the soil up, and we're going to let it seed naturally. And they're on this to the right. This photo is just them constructing the mound that we have. This was in the wintertime. I was asking our construction manager to send me a picture of the building, but he didn't get back to me. But so it's a lot of the finishing work is pretty much done. A lot of the inside, like as soon as we get some mill work done, within the next 3 weeks, we should be able to start moving in our fridges, our tables, all our furniture, and I worked with Julianne Warshaw. I know her as Julianne Peters, my niece, and she helped me put all of our signs in Secwepemc. The washrooms are in Secwepemc. Maintenance rooms, she's got it all in our language. So next steps is we're going to be setting up our archives and displays. We'll be finalizing our job descriptions. We are going to be looking through our communities for a young person that just would love to take over and has a lot of energy. Alana and I went down to West Bank in February, and we watched that lady and her team, and they were phenomenal and exciting. And we hope to find someone in our community that can come and take care of our center and tell our story, tell the story about us, who we are as Northern Secwepemc. Tell the story about the caribou. Tell the story about chasing the Qelmucw through their little tunnels and stealing their squinquinum. You know, just who we are as a people and how we got to be here today. So we're working on that, and we're trying to come up with good plans to finance it, and then we're also working on finding money for the exhibits. It's going to be about $3 million. We have some ways we're going to do it. We are working right now with David Jensen to have a few banners in our center that we can display when we have our celebration of completion of our building. And then we will have our 5 banners outside that will represent each of our communities. Juk? 108. It should be 108. Yeah, I was just asked a question. It is at 108. You know where the heritage site is? We're just south of it, a little bit back into the trees. Okay.
Oh, Fran.
Just give me a minute. Okay, so make sure that all children are accounted for. There was a flower bed that was destroyed, so so we got to make sure that our kids are nearby. Anyway, that's pretty important. So again, just searching. Thank you, Irene, for going. So wow, you both. You guys did a wonderful job. We may actually leave here early. And that was incredible because that was quite a lineup of information. So let's give everybody a hand. Yes, thank you. Boy, it must be that master of ceremony. You could just call me MC Rob. Okay, as I'm walking around, call me MC Rob. I'm good with that. So again, I'd like to thank you, Irene, and thank the Northern Secwepemc Cultural Society, you know, the NStQ, the Secwepemc, all peoples, I think will benefit for the work that's been done. And I'd like to also thank the elders, the knowledge keepers, and everybody that's, and the volunteers that come together to do that work. You know, I think it will benefit not only the people here and the surrounding in the region, because I do believe that when, for example, we had local, regional, and there's going to be, I think the mayor's showing up tomorrow, it just enriches the region. It reminds people that we've been here for thousands of years, that there was a government per se, there was peoples that were here per se, and we've been here for thousands of years taking care of the land, the resources, and everything that is around. And this, of course, the Cultural Society and the work that was just done and explained will tell that story. And so I think that is so important, and it will help everybody, I do believe. So with that said, I'm looking around for Fran. I know she's probably, yeah, they're getting everything ready. Because we have the final conclusion of the prizes. So you just took us by a little bit surprise. We're 15 minutes ahead, so that's why I'm going on and on and on here. And again, I would like to thank, you know, not only our leadership, but what was mentioned, our community members, our elders, our staff, everybody that's been involved there. We didn't give a hand to the cooks, so we have to give the cooks and thank them as well. And I know we had a prayer and cultural and drumming, and so that took care of the grace. And so, really thank the cooks, of course. And as soon as Fran is ready, we'll have her come up, and then there's going to be 5 more prizes, and I haven't been corrected. And I just love being back here because everybody, they say, Rob, you got to say this, you got to say that, and you got to say it right now. So I'm like, okay. So just good being back around the team again. So, and really good in the conversations that we've had on the side. Really appreciate everybody. And thanking everybody as well. So we're going to get the 5 prizes ready. And then, oh yes, please do.
Qelmucw, Irene, geëlkste stemgoelig, assesteertem knoegmens, gegaite stemgoeligem, pien, enensis, teknementem, kwaltenkt, kultenkt, wesenwiekt, Qelmucw, Qukstepku, gestetig emcht, pien, lekkeiseslu, Tekentepku, Secwepemc, schapkenwentem, Qukstepku, elkstens, kultens, temgoeligem, elkst, je gemeentem, kultenk, kwaltenkt, tuut, Qelmucw, lekkeiseslu.
Okay. And I always say you know, I really appreciate when it comes to the cultural and language speakers. And I think not only have they a richness of language, but I hope their check is really big as well. Just joking, but you know, I really do believe that when we have people with traditional knowledge and that know the language, we should reward them and we should lift them up as well. So I just wanted to applaud you very much. It's incredible.
Good step, good.
Yeah, being humble again. Okay, without further ado, because I know you don't want to hear any more from me, you want to hear from Fran. So Fran, please do.
Qelmucw. So what we're going to do is we're going to call the numbers out. And if you would just stay in your seats until we get all the numbers written down. And then once we do that, you can come up. And I'll keep them in order so that I can call you up one by one. Okay? So here's our first number, 606352. Let me know when you're ready. 605798. Our third number, 605655. Our fourth number, 606428. Just count. Our fifth number, 606028. Okay. Yep, so that's our 6 numbers. Got them all written down. Okay, so please come up if you have 606352, 606352. Our next number, 605798. Okay, behind you.
Quietest bunch.
I know, right? We're just saying everybody's so quiet. Woo! I thought talking treaty would have you all riled up and, you know, like let's get with it. So we have one of the draws from one of the tables, and I have your phone number and just a first name. So, and they've won a jar of candy. Clara, 250457.
The candy. Come on down.
Come on and grab your candy jar. Looks like she might have enough to share with everybody. Yay! I got a Werther's. Okay. What number did we end with? Next number? 605655. Okay. Yay. Okay, the next number is 606028. Oh, yay, it's my mama's best friend. I wonder if it's a jar of candy, too. She won a barbecue.
Number 2.
I'll give you $100 for the
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being so patient with us with the gifts. And when you register tomorrow, you'll get new tickets.
No, 9 a.m. tomorrow.
9 a.m. sharp.
Okay. Right on. Okay, everybody, thank you. Safe travels and take care. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Make sure to take all your personal items. There's not going to be anybody coming along cleaning up after you. So please take all your personal items and any garbage, put in the garbage. And 9 a.m. tomorrow. The drummers. Go with that one.
Matt Saginum.
Drummers. Let them know the drummers.
Drummers come up and help sing a song.
Yeah, sorry. My apologies. We have the drummers. They're going to drum us out. Okay? Sorry. The drummers will drum us out.
NStQ Kukpi7
Thank you, drum group. Hookstrom.